Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Brendan Bias from CheckIt.com and welcome to another Walkthrough Wednesday. In this week's tutorial, I'm going to show you guys a couple of tips and tricks that should be able to help you out in your future photo manipulations. And I'm going to do so by showing you how to take an existing picture of either yourself or some other person. In this case, it's going to be a picture of me. And I'm going to show you how to take that person and move them into a completely new environment. And I realize some of you are probably wondering, what the heck do you mean by that? Well, let me show you. So let's open up Photoshop and let me show you this picture that I have of myself. And it's really straightforward. I'm just leaning up against this this pole to a basketball hoop, just in like this old beat up yard, just full of, boring nothingness. It's really bland, really, just boring and such. So I want to put this picture of me and put it somewhere else. And the picture that I ended up using was this this picture of these trees here, and the effect that I ended up getting looks like this. So this is really straightforward, it seems, but there's actually quite a bit of work that goes here. There's the scaling and the positioning of me. There's a whole bunch of shadows, highlights, some color correction, and I even threw in this like little glow to kind of make it look a little more holy and stuff. But either way, guys, there's quite a few things that go into actually, moving someone into a new environment and having it look rather realistic and accurate. So we're going to be spending quite a while on this video, so buckle up and, hopefully you guys learn a thing or two from this. So what do you say we get going? So first things first, we're going to start off with the masked version of myself. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be teaching you guys how to mask in this tutorial because there's hundreds of tutorials on YouTube already. So if you're not familiar with masking or you're not comfortable with it, go watch some tutorials, get some more practice in, something, because I'm not teaching it here. However, if you guys want to, you can download this PSD from me, so just go to the description and look for all the downloads for this picture, the existing PSD that I made for this, and, all the other useful things of that sort. So we've got this picture of me, and we're going to place it into this picture of the woods. Just to clarify here, guys, if you decide to use a different set of pictures, make sure beforehand that they're going to work. If you're using some picture of like the sea and some like rocks with flowing water or something like that, I don't know, have a picture of yourself kind of like crouching over as if you're like playing with the water or something. I don't know what you guys are looking for. Just make sure that you have an idea of how it's going to look at the end of your effect. So I already knew that this picture, which is pretty freaking old, I knew that since I'm kind of leaning up against something, I'd be able to put myself leaning up against this tree over here. So I knew that it would work beforehand. Just something to keep in mind when you're choosing pictures for yourself, okay? So anyway, let's go back and select this portrait layer, and I'm going to click and drag this up to the tab for our image, bring it on down, let go, and voila, I have a magnificent butt. Okay, not really. My butt's like non-existent, but that's that's not the matter. So anyway, let's bring up the transform tool with Control or Command T on our keyboard, and I'm going to click and drag one of these corners in while holding the Alt and the Shift key, so that way it scales proportionally from the center. And let's just kind of get it down to a pretty decent size and hit Control 0 to zoom in. So let's kind of put this over to the side over here. And as far as trying to get the right scale here, there's no exact science behind it. There's no rulers, there's nothing like that going on here. So you basically just have to use your own judgment to get a good size here. For example, something that I did before was I kind of just moved myself to the side of this tree, and I kind of thought to myself, would I be as wide or a little bit smaller than the size of this tree? And in my opinion, I feel like I need to be just a little bit smaller than the tree, so maybe I'll just kind of scale myself down just a little bit, so that way I'm a little bit thinner on both sides here. And also at the same time, I kind of have this little shadow in the grass. So to me, that means it's a good place to put my foot because it looks kind of like a shadow, doesn't it? This looks like I'm kind of stepping into the grass and I'm making a shadow. So I'll put myself there after I scaled it, and I'll take a step back, and I can make a fair judgment from here. So in my opinion, this is actually looking like a good starting point. So I can go up top, click the little check mark, and that way it kind of, you know, just commits that transformation, and now here I am set inside the picture. However, a little problem that we run into when we're scaling down photos that have a mask to it is that we get this little edging going on, and I think that happens simply because of just the method that it uses to scale down images. It kind of feathers out pixels and stuff like that, so in turn it'll actually it'll feather out the mask a little bit. Either way, it doesn't look pretty. So what's an easy way to go about fixing that? Well, let me show you something real quick. You're going to hover your mouse over the masked icon for the portrait, and we're going to click that while holding the Alt key or the Option key if you're on Mac. And then we'll go to the left-hand side, select our rectangular marquee tool, and make sure that we're having a feather of 0 pixels and a style set to normal. And we're going to make a selection just inside the edge of this box here. So something like that should look pretty good. And then we'll go to Select and choose Inverse, or we can use Control or Command-Shift-I. So now instead of having this inner portion selected, now we have the rest of this white area selected. And we're going to fill that in with black by hitting Alt Backspace on our keyboard, because we have black as our foreground color. However, if you guys don't like those shortcuts and stuff like that, another thing that you can do is go to the left-hand side, click and hold on the gradient tool, and choose the paint bucket tool, and then you can click to fill in with whatever happens to be your foreground color at the time. However, I've already got this filled in with black, so I can go to Select and choose Deselect, or you can hit Control or Command D on your keyboard. So let's go back to our original view by clicking on the original thumbnail for portrait, and so that way we should get our original image here. So what you do from here is completely up to you. What should happen first, what should happen second? It really does not matter what order you do this in, so long as it happens. Something that I want to take care of right now is the coloring of me. I am very, very blue, as opposed to the lighting of this original image, which has a lot more yellow and a lot more green in it. So how do I go about fixing that? Well, a very popular way to do that is by using color curves. So let's go to our Adjustments panel. Let's add a Curves Adjustment layer. And to make sure that this is only affecting the portrait layer, we're going to click this little box icon with a downwards pointing arrow to turn it into a clipping mask. And so if you look at the left-hand side of the curves, it has this downward pointing arrow, signifying that it's only going to be affecting that layer below it, which is, you know, pretty handy. Alright, so as far as editing colors and stuff like that goes, it's, again, very hands-on experimental, and you kind of have to tweak with it. So let's go to this little RGB drop-down and give that a click, and start off with the red channel. So the first thing I'm going to do is bump up the reds just a little bit, so that way it makes me a little bit more red. And then if I go back and switch to the greens, I can bump up the greens as well. However, something that happens here is because I'm bumping up both the reds and the greens, the red and the green mix together to create a yellow color, which is what happens, you know, when you mix red light and green light. And if that's something that you guys don't know, you can find out why very easily. Just go to the left-hand side, go to your color picker, and just look at the colors here. You see you have red, and then you have green, and in between those two you have yellow. So red plus green makes yellow. Whereas if you have green and blue, when you mix those together, you get the brighter color cyan. And same thing with blue and red, they come together to create a really bright magenta. So if you need to find out how colors mix together, this sucker is actually pretty handy with that, alright? So just a little quick tip for those of you that don't know how light mixes together to create new colors. So anyway, we've successfully brought red and green together to create a more yellow feeling to this. Now, what happens if we go into blue and we bring that down? Well, that actually makes a very slight yellow as well. So if you bring that up, it makes it more blue. If you bring that down, it makes it a lot more yellow. So maybe just bring that down only a tiny bit because we don't want too much yellow here. And let's also go back to the RGB and let's bring down the midtones just to kind of darken me up just a few notches here. Just so that way it's not overly bright. I can go back and edit this anytime I want, which is the convenience of having a adjustments layer. Alright, so I've messed with the coloring of myself. What should I work on next? Well, how about I go in and add a nice little shadow beneath my feet and have that shadow trail off into the distance behind me? Well, in order to do that, I need to decide what color the shadow needs to be. So For example, let's go to the left-hand side and choose our foreground color here. And I'll move this up into the left, just so that way it's out of the way. Which color here seems to be like the most used in terms of shadows? In my opinion, right here in this little patch of dirt, I think that is the most like middle ground as far as shadows go. So I can click somewhere in there. Whoops. I apparently need to go back to the background layer and select that first. So let's color pick somewhere in here until we get something that looks pretty decent. So we're starting off somewhere around here. So this is like the general color of the dirt or something along those lines. And from here on, I think what I should do is kind of gray it out just a little bit and also bring it down. So we're getting this kind of murky brownish color. And with that, I'll hit OK. And next up, let's actually go ahead and choose our highlight color while we're at it. So let's switch our foreground and background colors. Let's select the white. And let's just choose this color out here. That's actually just a straight up white. So let's kind of select something a little bit more yellowish. So let's kind of move it. Let's see. So that's a bright white over there. What's going on up here? So a lot of these colors are like a very bright white, but I want something to have a little bit of a yellow hinge to it since the overall theme here is kind of yellow. So instead of just a straight up white, let's make something just kind of like a bright yellow. So somewhere up in this area should be pretty decent. So right now I've got FFF8DE, and let's hit OK. So here we go. I've got my shadows and my highlights picked out. So let's switch over to my shadows, and let's create a new layer, and we're going to start off with shadow 1, because I have a feeling that we're going to use several layers to kind of mix and match shadows together. So let's switch over to our brush tool by hitting the letter B, and let's zoom in a little bit. And the first shadow that I want to make is right here below the shoe. So let's right click, let's put the softness down, it's just so that way it's between, completely soft and a little bit more hard. And let's just kind of add a little bit of a shadow beneath the foot here. Alright, so obviously right off the bat, there's nothing great about this at all. It looks like trash. So something that I like to do is set the blend mode from normal to multiply, and then I can just put down either the fill or the opacity. It doesn't really matter which, and we can just put that down to something that looks a little bit better. So let's just throw it somewhere around here, around 40%. Whoops, I accidentally changed the blend mode. There we go. So here we go. I've just got this very slight shadow beneath my foot. It's just a starting point. I don't need it to be perfect. And while I'm at it, I also want to create the shadow that kind of trails off into the distance. But here's the question. How do I know which direction the shadow should go? Well, thankfully, that's made real easy by the shadows of these trees here. So one very defined shadow is right here at the bottom. It's very straight, and it looks like it goes to a very specific vanishing point. So here's what we're going to do. Let's create a new layer at the very top, and let's go pick out our line tool, and let's make sure that this line tool is set to something that's easy to see, so let's choose a bright white. Alright, and let's click and drag from the corner of this tree, and we'll just do it way out over here, and make sure it lines up with the shadow. So somewhere right there looks like it should be pretty good to me. Alright. Now, while holding the Shift key, so that way it makes a new line within the same shape layer, I can click and drag another one. So let's do it from right here, and let's move it way out over here. Make sure it matches up. All right. So we haven't gotten quite to a vanishing point just yet, but we're really close. So real quick, let's go to left-hand side and choose the Path Selection tool. And let's select the original line that we made, and let's bring up the transform tool with Control or Command T. And if we need to, we can rotate this so that way it better suits the angle of the shadow here. And I actually think where it was before was pretty good, so let's rotate that a little more this way. Alrighty. And we can also click and drag a corner out while holding the Shift key, and that should elongate it for us. Alright? So I'm thinking that's plenty long, so let's hit the check mark. And using the path selection tool, let's click to select the second line. Once again, bring up the transform tool, and let's kind of move it over here and rotate it a little bit, because it does look a little off to me. So let's do somewhere more around here. That's looking better to me. And once again, we'll click and drag this out while holding shift. And there we go. Now we're starting to get a more defined vanishing point off the left-hand side. So here's what we're going to do next. Let's once again go back to the line tool, hold the shift key, and start from roughly where these two lines intersect. And so now we can click and drag, let go of shift, and let's match this up with where my foot is. It doesn't have to be in any particular spot. I just need to know which direction the shadow needs to follow. So something right here is a rough estimate of, you know, the direction of our shadow. So let's make a new layer, and I can call this shadow long, shadow 2. It doesn't really matter. And let's go back to our brush tool, and I'm going to keep this simple. I'm just going to, you know, just kind of paint this in, all right? Now, obviously, there's more specific ways of going about and doing this, but I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to be feathering this out and making it rather transparent anyway. So, obviously, this right-hand side shouldn't be overly... sorry, not the right-hand side, but this left-hand side is rather straight, so I'm going to keep the shadow relatively even, maybe make a few bumps here and there, you know, something like that. However, immediately on this side, it kind of goes straight, so let's kind of do something like that, and then it kind of juts out a little bit, so I'll kind of make it do something like that. And then from there on, it just kind of, you know, does the regular thing. It just kind of goes straight out. All right? So something like that should be roughly good. It's, once again, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you guys are really concerned about that, something that you can do is make a selection out of, you know, whoever it is that you're masking out, and then just kind of do a little manipulation of that selection and make a shadow out of it. It's relatively straightforward, but I'm just going to stick with this because it worked before and I'm content with that result, so what the heck, right? So let's turn off the shape and let's set this to multiply and double check that there's not any like holes in the shadow that I missed, nothing of that sort. And then we can just kind of lower down the opacity, something like right around here. I don't know, that still feels a little bit too dark to me, so I'll put it down to like 45. I don't know, somewhere in there. Alright, so what else should we do? Something to keep in mind here, guys, is I'm stepping into the grass. So naturally, there should be kind of like a divot where I'm stepping, right? So let's turn off these other layers real quick. And let's make a duplicate of our background. So background edited. All right. Let's turn on where I am, and I'm gonna go grab the lasso tool, and I'm just gonna make a very rough selection around where my foot goes. All right. So maybe we'll move this, make it look right there. All right. So let's go to the transform tool with Control or Command T. And then up top, let's select the warp mode. There we go. That's what it's called. So click the warp mode up top, and very simply, we're just going to kind of drag this in. All right, and maybe I'll drag that up a little bit as well. And let's just kind of edit this this mesh here to make it look like it's being stepped on. All right, so everything's going to be pushed in towards the middle a little bit, and it's going to sag off to the left-hand side, things of that sort. Very, very straightforward. And so let's just try something like this. All right. So let's hit the check mark, hit Control D to deselect, and do it before. Whoops. Let's actually go back up here and do it before and after. So it's a little choppy, but I think I might have actually edited it a little bit too much. So let's try this again. Warp it. This time let's make it a little more subtle and just bring down the middle here. and just leave it at that. I think that looks a little bit better than it was before. Okay, so that's definitely a little bit better. And another thing to keep in mind is, since we're stepping into grass, there should be a couple blades of grass that, you know, overlap over my shoe, right? So let's do this. Let's make another new layer. Let's put up top, and let's go grab. Let's try the clone stamp tool, and let's set this to the current layer and below, so that way it's only sampling either the layer it's on or the layers that are below it. So in this case, like my shoes and the grass and such. And we're going to alt-click to sample somewhere. So let's find a blade of grass that I can sample. So let's try this blade of grass down here at the bottom left. And I'm going to size down the brush a little bit. And I'm going to make this a very simple blade of grass. All right. And then let's try adding in another one. So let's do, let's see, did I just do that one? Let's try this one down here. And we'll just kind of put this up like that. All right. So if you ever like mess up on anything, you can just grab like your eraser or your mask tool and just kind of, you know, fix that up a little bit. Just kind of go back and forth and see if you can get any, anything that looks good. Obviously, don't overdo it. Let's maybe put in one more like dark leaf kind of up here. All right. So something along those lines. You don't need to go like completely overboard with it. Just kind of, you know, keep it as natural as you can. And I'm gonna go a little bit more crazy than I did last time, just for kicks here. And voila. So this is our grass. All right. And whatever, I'm not going to mess up, or I'm not going to mess too much with that, just because it's not something that I think needs to be worried about. And let's turn back on the shadow. I really don't like how dark that's looking, so I'm going to tone that down a little bit, back down to 32. I guess it was kind of counterproductive to match it after the other shadow, but that's all this is, guys. It's just kind of, you know, going back and forth and see what you think looks natural, see what you think doesn't. And as far as these shadows go, I think I'm off to a good start. So one more shadow that I think that I can add here at the bottom. I want to add a shadow on the tree where I'm kind of leaning up against it. So let's make a new shadow. Shadow against tree, whatever. And let's swap over to our brush tool. And this time I'm going to soften it up quite a bit. And let's scale it up. And let's just do something like this. You know, make it very general, very soft. And I made it a little bit too big. I don't want it to go off to the edge here. Let's fix that up. So let's once again, let's change this to multiply. Put down the fill quite a bit. And something that I want to do is transform it and just kind of tweak it like this, just so that way it has a little bit more perspective to it. So let's just kind of do something like this, where I make it into like this crazy little like trapezoid here. And let's move this over here. All right. So it's a very, very soft shadow. There's nothing, I don't know, I have no idea why I'm doing this. I just think it kind of matches the perspective as far as like how the shadow should be. It kind of wraps around the tree a little bit. Mess with that as you please. It's, you know, once again, it's all, you know, a matter of what you think looks right. So that looks pretty good. Let's make another new shadow. This time it's going to be a little bit more harsh. So let's start it off right around here. And we're going to make this very, very close to the edge of where I'm at. And we'll do the multiply thing. We'll tone it down a little bit, so that way it's that darker shadow, but it's not overly dark, and not half bad. So that in itself is looking pretty decent. So how about we start to mess with what I'm looking like. I need to turn back on the curves here so it looks a little bit more natural again. All right. So as for the highlights and the shadows on me, I'm going to create all of these new layers between the portrait layer and the curves layer. So let's make a new layer in here. Let's call it highlights, and let's do another layer, and we'll call this shadows. And I don't need the shape layer anymore, so let's just delete that. And let's see, let's do this. Let's name that as our harsh against tree shadow. I don't know. Naming all these layers is important, especially when you decide to go back and tweak something. So make sure you're naming your layers as you go. It actually ends up helping a lot more than you think it would. All right. All right. So let's go to our highlight layer, and let's actually, I can't see my keyboard. There we go. So let's switch over to our highlight color that we decided on, which is this this really light yellow color. I might make it a little bit lighter, actually. And I'm going to try and simulate this harsh light that we see here, because the goal is to mimic the scene, right? So one of the most important things we need to do is mimic the light. And since I'm seeing this little harsh light on every single tree, I think it's only right that I should be hit with that same light as well. So seeing as this light here, it's not exactly, it's not soft, but it's not super harsh either. So how about we put the hardness of our brush up to something like 50%, and let's just see what happens when we start adding in this cool little harsh light. All right, so let's do this, and let's move it along right here. All right, so let's take a step back, see how it looks. That's actually not half bad. That actually looks a lot better than I was expecting it to, huh? However, looking at this, I do feel like my back and things like that, I feel like it does need to be a little bit darker. So I can either do that by using my curves adjustment layer, like I've been doing, so I might be able to just tone that down a little bit more. Or something that I can do is go into my shadows and use that layer. So let's go to the shadows layer, and quite simply, let's just put this all over my back. All right. So let's just put this over here. And right up against the light here. All right. So let's just kind of mess with it like that, huh? All right. And of course, on me. Whatever. You get the idea. So anyway, let's change this to multiply and put down that opacity quite a bit, and let's darken this up and just see what we're getting, all right? Oops. Stop changing the blend mode when I scroll, gosh dang it. And I keep missing multiply. Thank you. Gosh. Making me look like a fool. So here's before the shadow and with the shadow. I do think it adds quite a bit to it, but maybe I'll tone it down just a little bit. And something that you might want to, something to consider is I see this little line right here on the edge of my shirt. So maybe I can add like a very slight glint in there. So let's go back to my highlights and switch over to the right color. And let's kind of just add this in right in here. And let's kind of bring it on down. It doesn't look that bad, right? So, seeing as this is kind of trailing up the shirt a little bit, how about I go back in, let's put down the opacity on my brush, so that way it's not quite as harsh, and I can just kind of click and drag a couple of times as it goes up. And so that way it's like that little glint is kind of trailing off, right? And I think right in here I was supposed to mask it out, but I didn't, so I would probably end up putting in a little glint in here as well, but I don't know if that'll look all right. So I don't know. I guess that's not too bad, right? I don't know. So that's just kind of one of those things where you just have to make make the call yourself. Should I put in a little glint on these inner folds and stuff to kind of help it match? I don't know. In some instances, it might be all right, and some it might not. Looking at it, I really don't think it fits, so I'll try and go back as far as I can. And all right, so that's looking all right to me. So let's go into our shadows real quick. Let's see, where should some more shadows go? What is with this? It looks like it's really harsh right here. I feel like I need to fix that, but I think it's just the picture that I'm using that has a really harsh thing of light right there. So I don't know. I guess I'll just kind of ignore it. Let's see. Let's start making some new shadow layers. So let's do shadow 2. Switch back to our brush tool and scale it up. Right click, put down the hardness. One thing I want to do is add in a. Whoops! I need to put up the opacity here. I want to put in a shadow on the edge of my arms, because right here, if I remember right, it should darken up, as you know, because that's just where I'm leaning up against the tree. So let's kind of just go in here and very subtly add in the shadow. All right, up until the point where it meets or reaches the highlight up here. Okay. So let's do a little bit of before and after. It's kind of sloppy and uneven, so let's do our little multiply trick and kind of tone it down. And if you want to, you can go into filter, blur, and add in a very slight Gaussian blur. It'll be like less than a pixel, and that should kind of it should soften it up just a little bit for you if you kind of did that a little unevenly. And I think that actually looks pretty good. So while we're on it, let's actually add in another slight shadow on the back of the foot here. And the great thing about this is, since all of these layers are being clipped to the portrait layer, even if you try and paint outside of where you are, it'll clip it so that it's only being, you know, applied to where you are. So it's actually pretty handy to have. Let's kind of make some shadows on this little inner portion of the leg here, just so that way it's I don't know. I just feel like it would kind of fit, you know. And so let's put down the opacity a little bit more, help this blend a little bit. And let's also put in some shadows right over here, and have those trail up the pants a little bit. Maybe we'll put some under my butt, make it pop a little bit more. I don't know. I'm not an artist here, guys. I'm just kind of making it up as I go. I have no exact science. I am playing with this, guys. It's just what I think might look good, and I'm just praying that it does as I mess around with it. I'm not an artist. I'm just kind of doing what I think should look right. So you guys shouldn't assume that I'm just naturally better than you. I'm exactly the same. I have no idea what I'm doing, all right? Now, speaking of not knowing what I'm doing, because I think I'm speaking out of my butt here, I've seen in pictures to where even though there shouldn't be any light hitting on this end here, there's like, with pants and stuff like that, there's these like stray fibers and stuff that kind of magically catch the light as it passes by. So what I think kind of helps this, just based off that alone, is to go back to our highlights and just ever so slightly, let me size down the brush and bring it up opacity, just ever so slightly add a glint on the opposite side of the pants over here. All right, so I have a very soft brush, and I'm just kind of going back and forth, just kind of matching the shape and the form of the pants as I go down, and I'm adding just a very, very slight glint. That one was a little bit more bright than I intended, but I don't think it'll be such a bad deal. So let's just kind of go through and add in this very slight glint. Oops, let's undo that a little bit as we go down. And of course, when we get down to the edge of the pants here, it actually starts to get into the shadows. So I might actually just kind of leave that alone. So from a distance, it might be kind of hard for you guys to notice, so I'll zoom in a little bit. There's this very slight glint now on the other side of my pants, and in my opinion, that just helps it to look a little bit more natural and more realistic. So I might add just a little bit more, kind of going up here. However, I'm getting pretty close to the tree, so I'm not gonna overdo it here. Okay, so let's take a step back and see how it's looking. See what we think needs to change here. I might need to go back in and make the shadow under my foot a little bit darker. So maybe what I'll do is, just increase that opacity a little bit, and maybe I'll actually go back in and blur it out some. So kind of like what I did for one of the shadows earlier. And so maybe we'll darken that up just a little bit, and then go to the long shadow and put that up a little bit. So just kind of go back and forth and, just tweak what you think might need to be edited a little bit. And as it is, I'm feeling very comfortable about where this is going. However, something that I did prior to in the other demonstration here is I added this cool little glow, all right? And the reason I added that in is because this overall picture, especially right here, like in this middle area, you can see that there's this like kind of godly glow going on here. So I wanted to kind of replicate that and apply it to myself. So let's try and do that right now. Let's make a new layer, and let's call this our glow, all right? And I didn't do anything particularly fascinating here. I just make just one big spotlight here in the middle, all right? And so let's bring up the transform tool, and let's rotate this to the appropriate angle. So right now I'm angling this so that way this point just kind of trails through in this general direction that looks like the light should be going. And now I can stretch this out, and I'll do so while holding the Alt key. So I'll do something like that. Maybe we'll rotate it a little bit more this way. So just kind of stretch that and rotate it in a way that seems to look pretty good to you guys. And once it looks good, we'll hit the little check mark to commit that transformation. And let's do this as let's try a linear dodge and just kind of tone this down. So let's just put it somewhere around right here. So maybe linear dodge is a little bit too much. Let's put it we'll just put that back to screen. And let's put the opacity up to somewhere around here. I don't know. And let's apply a layer mask because it's kind of washing up onto the edge of our tree here. So I'm just going to get rid of that because that shouldn't be there. And let's do a quick little before and after. I don't think that's half bad. So if you wanted to, you can go into the effects and add in a color overlay. And you can make this, a little bit more of that golden color. And we'll just change that to like color. Or you can change it to overlay. Just kind of do that to add in a little bit of color to that glow there. And so that way it should make it a little bit more suiting to the original. Now that I look at it, that's actually not half bad, is it? However, I kind of want to wash it out just a little bit more. So that way it's not quite as orange. I think that actually looks really nice, don't you think? So what do you say? One thing that I do want to do now is go to my crop tool. So I can do that by hitting the letter C on the keyboard, by the way. And I just want to crop this to 16:9 ratio, and you can do that by going to the top left-hand side and choosing this little drop-down, and you can just change that to 16:9 and click the check mark, all right? So let's just take a look at how this is starting to check out for us and see what we might be able to edit. So looking at this, I'm not entirely sure what there's left to edit for it. I mean, I did the little simulation light, I've messed with the shadows and stuff like that. The only thing that I really could do is go back and forth between the intensity of all the shadows and maybe go reference some actual pictures of people in the woods and just spend a couple hours going back and forth and tweaking shadows and lights and things of that sort just to make it look a little bit more natural. But I think I've covered just about everything that you guys should need to know on how to place yourself into a new environment. So just take all these things that I've given you guys as far as matching lighting, putting yourself in a good spot. You can put all those things together and, you know, just do a completely new effect on your own. So if you guys learned something from this tutorial, or if you just, you know, enjoyed watching it, please give this video a like. I would really appreciate it. I've been recording here for like 40 some odd minutes, and I was actually kind of wondering whether I wasn't sure if I would make it through this at all, because I have no idea if I would explain it well enough for you guys. So please give me your feedback, guys. Let me know if I did a good enough job trying to explain this to you. And if you have any tips for me and for my creations here as to, you know, how I could maybe perfect this a little bit more, I am more than happy to accept you guys' feedback, because I know I'm not perfect. I'm still learning just like you guys. So anyway, guys, that's all I have for you. I will see you next week. Peace out.